Hello everybody, thank you all for coming along to this panel. Before we get started, I would just like to acknowledge that we are gathered today on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people. We pay our respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all First Nations people here today. My name is Steph Panecasio. I am the managing editor of Games Hub, and I am thrilled to be here today discussing some of the most legendary games to have come out of South Australia with a very talented and wonderful panel to the right of me here. So what I will ask that each of you do is just, as we go down the line, tell us who you are and what you do.
Alrighty, I am James O'Connor. I am the game development executive at the Film Corporation. I come from a game design, narrative design background. I think I'm actually the only person on this panel who hasn't worked on any of the games that are featured in the panel, but as executive, I decided to insert myself into it to have fun, so that's why I'm here.
My name is Damon, pronouns they, them. I am a narrative designer. I worked on Hacknet Labyrinths, but I've also worked on Necrobarista as a lead writer and also on Eternal Strands, which came out last week.
David Kazi, I'm the founder and creative director at Ember League, formerly the technical director on Hollow Knight.
And hi, I'm Dr. Mike Cooper, tech director at Tantalus South. Are they in the house? Yes, they are.
We've got a few.
And I've previously worked at Chrome, Ratbag Games, 6 Foot Kid, at AIE, and been making games in one way or another for the entire millennium.
Fair enough. So the way that this is going to work is we're going to go through a few games that really stand out to us. I will give a little bit of a rundown of the game, but what I would like is when we first announce what the next game that we're talking about is, if you could give a round of applause if you have played it or if you have heard of it. So we'll do 2 rounds. And we'll do that so that we can get a gauge of where everybody is at. And then we'll talk to the panel about their experiences with it. Maybe they've worked on the game. Maybe they have some fun memories and whatnot. And as a fun little thing, for some of these, I went trolling through Steam reviews to find some fun ones. And that took some years off my life, so I will be telling you them.
Always a gold mine.
Oh, and some of them were wild. I didn't pick too many of the strange ones, but we're going well. So to kick things off, we're going to start with Power Slide, which is a racing game released in 1998, developed by Ratbag Games. So who has played it? Okay, we've got one hand. Who has heard of it? Few more. All right, sweet. So for anybody who has not played it and has not heard of it, the game is a racing game that is set in a dystopian 2020, I believe. 2020? Oh,
maybe.
The future at the time. Where the world has kind of gone to hell a little bit, with 98% of the population dead, and the rest of that, the 2% left, are split between above ground and below ground, where above ground you've got the more, I believe it's feral communities, and below ground you've got the wealthy corpos. But we focus on above ground, where we are power sliding, competing in illegal races through deserted streets, parking lots, sewers, and more. And on top of that, Power Slide has the honour of being the first major boxed game developed in South Australia as well. We do have a video for it, so let's have a look. I think I would have crashed a number of times at this point, personally speaking.
Do you think this game is called Power Slide because of all the power sliding
Maybe
that seems
it's
to be
power sliding.
happening?
Who's to say? Alrighty, so to start things off, I will tell you the Steam review that I found for this, which is one of the more tame ones. I just really liked the cadence of what they said. So this user has said, "This was and still is the best racing game ever. Nothing plays like this game in terms of handling, control, map design," and then they end really solidly with, "It's all good, bruv." And I thought that was great.
Hard to argue with.
Hard to argue, it's all good, bruv. So, Dr. Mike, you joined Ratbag after this game was
Yeah,
released, but
that's
you've got a
right.
bit more of an inside scoop than any of us here because of that anyway. So can you give us like a little bit of a vibe check on what it was like at that point?
Yeah, so making games back then was very different from what it is now, in that you needed to ship physical products, CDs in boxes to lots of people, and, you know, probably have a publisher and so on if you wanted to actually make money from making games. And Ratbag was started by Greg Siegel, a businessman, Richard Harrison, a programmer, and they sort of got together, had a few secret weapons that I'll tell you about in a minute, and managed to get this game out and get it published and distributed and so on. So the secret weapons were, number one, Richard Harrison. He raced motorbikes in his spare time.
That helps.
So what you hear in the review there about being able to, you know, the handling and so on, he developed a really good kind of physics model and would, you know, bore me with discussions about friction underneath the tires, slide-in friction versus static friction, etc. I only have a PhD in physics now. Okay, cool. And that made it, you know, very good game to play in terms of the handling and everything. Secret weapon number two, Richard Harrison. He'd gone to ANU and done a master's degree in some sort of, you know, neural network studies and so on. When you make a game like this, a racing game where the cars can slide all over the ground and so on, it's very hard to get an AI to drive that. So he basically wrote a system that taught where the cars taught themselves how to drive using neural network technology and so on. And therefore he had really good physics, really good AI. Secret weapon number three, not Richard Harrison, but a team of people, of young guys, Jeff, two Jameses, Aaron, Adam, Saxon, and anyone else who I forget, I apologize, who put together the Difference engine, which was a graphics engine for rendering using these fancy new graphics cards that people were putting into their computers at the time. Because this was started in '96. That's around about the year Quake came out. Yeah,
Is this
roughly.
the 3D effects cards?
3D
or
effects
Voodoo
cards,
2?
yeah. Yes, this was Voodoo 2 and so on. And, you know, at this point, writing a graphics engine involved writing a separate variant for Voodoo cards, another one for OpenGL and so on. And this team put together this sort of state-of-the-art thing. I remember when I first saw Power Slide, when I went in for an interview, it was like, whoa, what manner of moving photograph magic is this? Which is quite funny seeing the video now.
It's still
But
impressive.
that was really something. That was something very impressive. So, you know, props to Adelaide for making one of the first shipped games to fully support graphics cards. That's how special this was. You know, it was getting showed as a kind of showcase item in various international game conferences and so on. Yeah.
One of the things that you touched on that I find really quite interesting about this is the physics engine, because my understanding is that it has four-wheel independent suspension, hence how you can slide all around. I'm not really a cars person. I'm not going to pretend like I am. But I do know that that means that you can do, I think, 6 degrees of freedom is what it's called, where you can basically like move in all of the directions that you need. That is the extent of my car knowledge. We're not going to go deeper than that. But I think the fact that the physics engine allowed for that is really quite impressive.
Yeah, I'm just going to have to say yes. I'm not really a car person either. But
I'm a huge car person, actually.
Okay.
Did I get it right?
I build race cars. It
Wow.
shows. I actually legitimately think it shows. You can see the way the cars move. I
Yeah.
don't see games now doing that.
yeah,
so-
if you put all racing games in a spectrum, you've got Mario Kart at one end, Power Slide sort of at the other end, of kind of realistic, you know, hard to pick up. I got involved in some of the later games at Ratbag doing the collision physics, and I found that it was so hard to drive that basically I had to drive around the track the wrong way to collide with other cars. because I'm not a car person, you know.
Well, as a car person, can you explain what the 6 degrees of freedom thing means? Because I know in a conceptual way, but I would be very much not the person to explain it.
I would take a guess at it that in normal games, if you had a flying game, 6 degrees of freedom just means your different ability to roll and then move in those axes. And in this case, if it's on the ground, it would be that as the suspension's moving over bumps and things, the car is actually, you can see it responding. So just leaning into corners and things like that. All that translates to for the player is it's much more responsive. It does what you think you want it to do. You're not skidding off the road.
Yeah,
and sliding games particularly are difficult. So.
And it does the power slide thing where your sort of back wheels come out to take a corner, and that's actually the optimal play style. Because that's really hard to do in a racing game, to figure out. You know, we want to put the physics together so that the best way to get the best lap times is to swing your rear end out and take the corners that way.
So it's almost better if I'm not good at it because I'm already kind of slipping and sliding. Yes?
No, I'm afraid not. No, you have to be very good at it to succeed, to even make a lap, I found.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But you'll have fun doing it.
Oh, yeah.
I will say on this one, a while ago I was putting together a presentation on the history of South Australian game development, and this was the earliest game I could find, but I feel like that can't possibly actually be true. I think game preservation is at a point where we've lost a lot of solo projects or smaller projects. I reached out to genuinely multiple local games historians who I thought might have more information. Nobody could tell me anything, so
Well,
if there's...
a guy down the comic shop told me today South Australia produced some kind of maths game where you were shooting things to add up numbers. And that he tracked down an address in Hanson Road somewhere.
I'm sure there are
Don't have better details
several
than that.
examples of games like that, and game preservation is important, is all I want to say, really.
It's extremely important.
And if anyone knows any earlier games made in South Australia, please reach out and let me know, because I am interested.
Yeah.
I can think of one actually called D-Zone. I remember playing a demo for that. I think
just
had
come
a
to this
Salisbury
panel.
address in
This
it.
is the right people to be asking. All right, well, we've kicked off strong with a racing game. We're going to continue because we're going to get the cars out of the way early because, again, my knowledge, very limited. I'm glad that we've got you here because you have some car knowledge. And we're going to go to the next one, which is World of Outlaws Sprint Cars. Also developed by Ratbag Games. World of Outlaws Sprint Cars was released in 2002. To my great personal joy, World of Outlaws in general is often abbreviated to WOO. So you'll please forgive me for mentally calling it WOO Sprint Cars for the last week. But it's a licensed racer featuring real drivers and 12 real tracks, and it was reviewed very favourably, but couldn't find any funny ones, so we've left it for this one. But it was the first PS2 game developed by Ratbag, and I believe it took over a year to come to Australia after the release in North America. So you were at Ratbag.
Yeah.
I would love to hear a little bit about how this came to be.
Now we're talking. I was lead programmer on this one. There's our lead engine programmer over there.
Hello.
Hey, Tony. So to continue with the story of Power Slide, it was groundbreaking with its graphics cards. And I think one of the people at the publishers, one of the marketing people, really didn't like that. So Power Slide didn't do very well. Because this marketing guy was just like, what, I have to install special hardware in my computer to play this? Ugh, that'll never catch on. So Ratbag sort of went into preservation mode a little bit and started making titles like Dirt Track Racing, some more PC titles that were, how shall I say, realistic, bogan racing simulators. You know, gone with all the kind of Mad Max, Ferals up here, Elites down here kind of thing. And it was just, yeah, we're driving cars around in some dirt somewhere in the outback. Yeah, all right.
That was a very good, like, bogany accent there. I will commend you on that one.
I try my best, yeah. And then they tried to get in a deal with Sony for PS2 titles, and we basically got 2 titles which we were going to do. One was Sprint Cars, which was, that's the safe bet. You have to do that one because you've got a track record of racing games. And we want to do an action game as well, because a lot of people at Ratbag were kind of hanging to do something different. And that's where sort of second generation Ratbag came on board, me, Tony, and other people. and started working on this PS2 title. So Sprint Cars is a really strange kind of racing game. Do we have a picture of one there?
We have a picture. We don't have a video for this
I
one.
will
but-
draw attention to a few key features of Sprint Cars. That wheel, the back right one, is bigger than the others, so that it can go around in circles really well.
And that's something you want.
You want
In
that.
a car?
That's not a mistake. That's not an art
Great.
mistake or a perspective thing. That wheel is bigger. This aeroplane wing on the top is there to kind of push the car down as it drives to get better traction. And the tracks are all perfectly oval. None of this, branch, whatever. You literally just go around in circles. It is machine designed to go around in circles as cheaply and as fastly as possible by whatever, kind of talented bush mechanic came up with this. And yeah, we worked on this for, sort of 18 months or whatever. And yeah, this was the game out of the two of them that succeeded and actually got out. It wasn't quite my thing, really. Contrary to what people were saying in the panel before, if anyone was there, you do sometimes end up working at a game company which you're not that enthused about. Bogan racing games were never my thing, really. And I was sort of looking at what else was going on in Australia and just, oh my God. But, at the same time, you've got to find the love for whatever you do. We all went out and watched a sprint car race at one point, which was really freaky. These cars with their open wheels will interlock. I'm just going to put my mic down. Do that. And the front one flips when that happens. And I saw that happen in real life. And I thought, damn, I've done a good job on the physics, because that's what it looks like in the game. That's how cold game developers are, everyone. Yeah, and, the one sort of review that I'd like to say was from this guy called Brad Doty. So he used to be a sprint car racer. He injured himself, was in a wheelchair, couldn't race anymore, and was a commentator. And we actually had... voiceovers from him saying phrases like, "He's planting corn." That's when the nose of the car goes down into the front, because apparently that's like some kind of corn planting machine, which I know nothing about either, being a metrosexual urban type. And he said at the end, damn, that game was the closest to driving a sprint car again, since I had the accident. And I just thought,
Aww.
wow.
High praise.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So the questions, who has played it? Has anyone played it? Couple of hands. Obviously, you've played it. You've played it extensively.
Begrudgingly.
I'd be very surprised if you didn't raise your hand for that one. Has anyone been to see actual sprint racing? Ooh. Was it as wild as that description? Yeah?
Keep your
About the
hand,
same
'cause
number
I
of
think
hands.
it's weird.
Yeah? Interesting.
Like completely different people.
Completely different people. But I tell you what, some of those hands shot up at that one going, yes, I've seen it. It's great. And I respect that very much. So have any of you also gone to sprint racing before or played the game at this point?
This thing is completely off my radar. I'm really enjoying hearing about it.
Yeah.
Is it really a thing in Australia?
Yeah. People
pretty
really
big.
do this in Australia. We had to travel a little bit outside of Adelaide, I think. It was dark.
Big rural
whoop,
I
sport.
can't remember. Yeah, that's where it was. It was Whoop Whoop.
Whoop, whoop. Yeah,
Thank you, yeah.
Was that the sequel as well? Whoop Whoop Racing? Or?
Yeah, that's World of Outlaw. I don't know, forget what the P stands
It's
for
woo
there.
whoop
Yeah.
whoop, if that's the case.
That's a world of outlaw parking, I think. That's when you're just arriving to watch the sprint cars.
Oh my goodness. So with that, we have hit the second and last of our racing games. We're going to move and jump ahead a little bit, and we are going to go to Star Wars The Force Unleashed, specifically for PSP. Another one that you have
Yes,
worked
who
on.
worked on that?
But this time at Chrome. So released in 2007, Star Wars The Force Unleashed specifically for PSP is critically regarded as the best version of the game, beating out both PS2 and Xbox 360 on an average basis, which is pretty impressive given that you would not normally expect a PSP game to be hitting those sorts of responses, which is wild. I do have a couple of little
In your
review
face are
ones.
the states. No,
Yeah. So, just quickly, in a retrospective review of the game entitled Star Wars The Force Unleashed for PSP Shouldn't Be Possible, Writer Elijah Beam wrote for DualShockers, Chrome's work on The Force Unleashed is nothing short of wizardry, being one of the few games to truly deliver a home console experience in the palm of your hand over a decade before the Nintendo Switch, which is a very glowing praise. And then on Steam, I grew up playing that version on the PSP, and it was my favorite out of the versions I've tried. It also has a couple of levels and fights that are missing from the other versions, so the memory of playing them is fully like a fever dream. So again, you've worked on this one. I'll let you take the lead on here.
Sure, yeah. So Ratbag collapsed. Won't dwell on that. Chrome swooped in and employed about 20 of us in a little experiment because they were kind of riding high at the time. And initially we were going to work on a port of Spyro the Dragon to PSP, and then The Force Unleashed came up. And the head guy from Chrome just said, what do you want to work on? Star Wars game? And I was like, yeah, this is more like it.
No more bogan racing games for you. You're going to get real...
Yeah, I'd finally achieved what I wanted to do when I was 8 years old, make a Star Wars game. So LucasArts were making The Force Unleashed on the new platforms, the 360 and the PS3. And they had a very kind of new tech-driven approach, digital molecular matter, where everything can fall apart procedurally. Euphoria was a system for... It was always described, if you picked a stormtrooper off with the Force and threw them, they might grab onto something programmatically without you telling them to. And it was like, okay. And Chrome in Brisbane were doing the PS2 version, the sort of downgraded one. And they were just making that from scratch. They were just making a really fun game where you get to throw stuff around with the Force as this apprentice character who's like, you know, got more midichloridians than anyone else ever in existence or will, and can, you know, bring a Star Destroyer down from space into a planet using the Force, and so on. And yeah, we were doing the PSP port down in Adelaide. So we were sort of, you know, working with them, but we had a few other problems to solve, like multiplayer physics, network multiplayer physics. Game programmers, feel free to let your stomachs clench at those words. And, you know, we got that working. A talented guy called Phil Mays helped us out with that one. And then we had these historical missions, which we added to the game as well. And these came down from LucasArts. They wanted to have five scenes from the Star Wars movies that you could play. Like... a
couple of the examples I've got here for you is facing down Jabba, facing down Count Dooku,
yeah,
and
there's a Sarlacc pit one, where you're rescuing Han Solo and fighting Boba Fett from the beginning of Empire Strikes Back. Hang on, Return of the Jedi. Yep, I know my Star Wars. And, you know, that was a cool one. I remember testing that and seeing how much stuff you could throw into the Sarlacc pit and have it pile up before the physics went unstable. And they made the really weird decision of having the Luke, I am your father scene as one of the playable missions, where you play as Darth Vader.
Spoilers for Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah. So someone at LucasArts thought, there's a lot of fans out there going, oh boy, I can't wait to cut Luke Skywalker's hand off and tell him I'm his dad. Let's do that in an interactive environment. And we did. And it was great.
Now that you've said it like that, that kind of is something that I absolutely would have been down for. But something that I would like to ask everybody on the panel and kind of open it up to all of you, because we're kind of discussing now the idea of the PSP version being that best version critically, I wanted to touch on the idea of prestige content beating out prestige platforms and what your experience has been like with that. So if anybody would like to...
Well, that's an interesting one. Like games there, the Wii version was the best one.
Some of them are.
I have to think on that. I do remember at the time I played the Xbox 360 version of this game because I simply didn't have a PSP. And then I got to know a lot of the folks at Chrome, and I say this with only love in my heart, were very proud of the fact that this was the best reviewed version of the game and would bring it up at any opportunity.
I mean, wouldn't you?
Yeah, there was a real moment of pride. And I feel like in Australia has a very rich history of developing mobile versions and portable versions, I meant to say, like Game Boy versions of console games. Rich history of that with like Beam Software and various other studios that aren't coming immediately to mind. But
Beam Software, who became Chrome Melbourne.
yes.
And worked on some of these, yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like it was a real experience for a lot of people growing up that the only version of a game they had was the portable version. And whether that actually was the best version or not, it became like the version in their head and the version that they remembered and the version that they loved deep in their heart. And it's nice to think that there must be people who had that experience with the PSP version of Force Unleashed as well, and that they are now vindicated because we're here saying this was the best version.
I mean, there are numbers to prove it on Metacritic, I think.
Yeah.
84 or something.
It's 100% got the highest average overall.
I still don't know if we're anywhere in the world 4 people gathered together to Bluetooth multiplayer on this game.
Somewhere, sure.
Somewhere that might have happened. Oh, it happened in our office. Might have happened somewhere else, yeah.
Do we have 4 people with PSPs in the crowd right now?
I was going to say, can we make it happen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so the question originally, who has played just generally The Force Unleashed? Who played it on PSP? Okay, a couple of the hands went down, but some people have. Do you think it was the best version? Yeah? All right, I respect that.
Can I ask a follow-up question to Dr. Mike? What do you think were the sort of material circumstances that led to you guys being asked to make these extra historical moments and also just like making the best version? Is it just because you were like really good at your jobs, or like did you have a reputation with LucasArts?
I don't know why our one turned out better because we had more stuff in it, really, I think. You know, we got to add the historical missions, we got to add the multiplayer aspects and so on, which I think weren't in the PS2 game. And really, I suppose I should give a big shout out to the Brisbane team because they made the game, they made the engine. We put it all together down here. Yeah. As to why the historical missions came about, I don't know. Someone at LucasArts thought, you know...
Really loves the PSP.
Yeah, really loved cutting Luke Skywalker's hand off. And thought, yeah, we have to disguise this by having 4 other historical missions as well.
So now we move on to the first game that nobody on the panel has worked on at all. So, you laugh, but I would like, before we ask who's played it, I would like you to raise your hand if you have ever identified or have been identified as a horse person. Nobody wants to say. Behind me?
I see Elias
I knew
in
there'd
the,
be
in the chat.
one. Absolutely. So, Horse Riding Tales is an online game developed by Foxy Games in 2019. So we've got a bit of a jump from when Force Unleashed was going on. And players can tame horses, train them for show jumping competitions, and befriend other folk and animals while playing. Anecdotally, in my very dark past as my town's showgirl, and I'm not going to go deeper than that, it was my solemn duty to award ribbons to horses, and as such, I can say they're actually pretty cool. On Steam, however, there's a very similar reaction to what was said in the room here, because the reviews that I found were very similar in tune to this. I can finally enjoy my secret passion and enjoy the horse experience without anyone knowing. So I don't 100% believe that because nobody put their hands up that nobody's secretly a little bit of a horse person. So nobody here has worked across this game, but it is a really cool example. Yeah, I know, I'm sorry, not this one. It is a really cool example of how dialing in on a niche really can sometimes work. And I'd love to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I have played this one at least. When I started this job, I tried to get across most of the major South Australian developers, and if we're going to be talking about some of the great South Australian developers, Foxy is one that we should be giving credit to because they have had a very stable team making...
a stable team?
Stable product.
Hey there.
Pun not intended, but I'll take the laughs. This game has been well received by a very large audience of people who love horses and love to collect and look after horses. And horse gaming is a huge genre. It's this sort of Wild West out there. And I guess if you're not tapped into it, then...
Wild West?
Yeah, we don't need to laugh at that one. They've just... Like Dr. Mike was saying before this panel to us, and we'll probably say again in a moment, they really did find their thing, and they've just fine-tuned it, and they've really listened to their audience, and they have made a game that even if people in this room aren't as familiar with it, there are many, many people all over the world who are really into this and enjoying the experience and leaving very positive reviews of it. So
very much so.
It's a very like sincere love as well. Like there are full on like dedicated like horse gaming publications. Like people are really dialed into this, and I think it's like a good example of how there's always an audience. You just kind of have to find them, and you have to like really sincerely engage with them.
It's very community driven, I think, as well, especially in this particular community, because when you are so into it that you're willing to perhaps, I don't know, put your hand up in the middle of a lecture theatre and say, yes, I am a horse person and I'm not ashamed of it, then you really kind of gravitate to those other people. And I feel like it's one of those communities that, because it is an online game, you're really able to access that, because in my experience at least, a lot of people who are very into horses, for instance, live very rurally, might not be as closely connected. And it's games like this have allowed connectivity for those people as well. But dialing into that niche meant that it was able to happen.
If I may take the reins for a minute.
You may.
Yeah, I mean, I asked for this one to go in, asked James to pop it in, because this sort of marked the point where we were starting to get an ecosystem of game companies in Adelaide. And it was a big change. You know, most of my early career was there is Ratbag Games. Then they went down, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm going to have to get a proper job. Chrome swooped in. They went down as well, and really good at bringing game companies down. Thought I'd have to get a proper job. Yeah. And then, you know, fast forward to when Foxy Games and Mighty Kingdom and various other companies were going, it was like you'd actually see people hopping from one game company to another and having a career like that. And it was like, wow, this is amazing. Odd Games as well, for example, who do the Monster Truck games. Yeah. And I also just wanted to pop this in because Dineth, who runs Foxy Games, has employed 10 of my students from AIE. I would always enjoy those conversations with him. Right, what do you think of this person? Yeah, hire them. Yeah, great, cool.
And to touch on that, the audience size and the niche, I mean, we say niche, but like it has 10 million downloads on the App Store. So I wouldn't have guessed that the audience size is there, but there is always an appetite. So it's worth exploring. That's one of the things.
It's kind of one of those things where it's like, it's a niche to some people, but it's everything to other people.
It may be a game which none of us have worked on and no one in the audience wants to play, but it's still worth talking about. Yeah.
I think they might want to play it. I just don't think they want to put their hands up.
Yeah. Hands up if you want to play this game.
Yeah, now. Are you
now.
Hands up if you really want to play this game but don't want to admit it. Go on.
We won't tell. It's fine. Okay.
I think the thing is as well, like, you know, as we're growing up, there are all these, I think unfairly mostly joked about, like Barbie games, particularly Barbie horse games, which sold millions of copies. And nobody was serving that market until Foxy released the game.
Absolutely.
Yep. When I went to AGDC, which was before GCAP, when I went down to Melbourne at Ratbag, and I was working on the sprint car games and hating it because it wasn't my kind of game. I remember there was a game company called Badass Games who did a talk about working on Barbie games. And I kind of guessed that's not what they set out to make from their name.
Yeah.
But they were saying, so we got this contract and we all went and watched these Barbie cartoons, unironically, and put Barbie stuff all around the office and so on.
That sounds like a great time.
Yeah, and, you know, which is cool now because of the movie, right? You know, I'm sure they had an Oppenheimer poster on the other wall as well. But yeah, you know, when you find a niche genre like this, you want to embrace it unironically and make a really good game. And that's what's happened here.
Yeah, and Mighty Kingdom, another major South Australian studio, they worked on games for Barbie. They worked on Ava's Manor, which was basically a soap opera game that I got to write on, had a lot of fun. They did Shopkins. They did all sorts of things that weren't necessarily, nobody in the studio was necessarily the target audience of a lot of these games, but it can be really rewarding actually making a game for somebody other than yourself. Especially, I'm a straight white man. I am catered to all the time. I don't really need more things for me, so it can be really nice to think about the person at the other end of the product who you've never had to think about in your life, but is the exact target person who will really enjoy the thing you're making.
All right, so moving on, because we want to make sure we hit all of our targets before we run out of time. Speaking of winning niches, we are going to now jump to Hacknet and Hacknet Labyrinths, but what I'm actually going to do is, instead of giving my little introductory spiel, I'm going to, again, hand over the reins a little bit to Damon, who actually worked as a writer on the expansion. Would you mind giving us a general overview and a little vibe check of the game?
Absolutely. So Hacknet, I think the elevator pitch was that it's like a Hollywood hacking simulator. So whatever's happening on the screens in a movie where there's hacking, like Hacknet aims to kind of replicate that. It kind of follows in the footsteps of other sort of hacking simulators like Uplink, except it's sort of a lot more user-friendly. You're not just playing with the command line. There's a lot of really smart UI stuff. And it's all about just looking through people's files.
Hacking.
Troublesome style.
Absolutely. So with over 24,000 Steam reviews, there were a lot of fun ones to choose from, but I did find 2 little nuggets that I really liked. So the first one was, played this while I was working. Boss thought I was working. 10 out of 10, woodworking again. Second one, amazing game, almost got me kicked out of college because they thought I was breaking the law. So I feel like that's a glowing endorsement if ever I've heard
Oh,
one.
I love that.
Yeah.
And you know, Matt put a lot of work into making sure it was like relatively similar to the sort of contemporary hacking tools available at the time.
Has anyone played it? Ooh, a few people. Do you now enjoy a little bit of surreptitious hacking when you have the opportunity? No? Not that you'd admit it in this. I feel like you'd sooner admit the horse thing rather than that at this point, but that's fair enough. But the game is kind of considered a bit of a bastion in the hacking sim space now. You can see inspiration derived from it in other games that have come since. But again, it really is striking that niche. So what was the experience like in working on it?
I only worked on it for like 4 months.
Still counts. That's 4 months more than any of us here.
Yeah, so I actually first encountered it when I was in high school, attending the Indie Games Room. I met Matt. There was this demo where it was back in the era where computers had CD drives. And at the end of the demo, you would have a character talking to you and they'd be like, I've hacked you. And the CD drive on the demo PC would open, which was like such a cool way to end a demo. But then, yeah, later on it came out, I think 2015, played it, loved it. I was in the same sort of game dev communities as Matt, which there was one. It was very small. It's wild to see like that this has happened, by the way, like since in the last 10 years, like how the scene has grown. It's wild. But yeah, he took me out to lunch one day. He was like, Damon, do you want to work on the expansion? And I'm like, yeah, obviously yes. And yeah, then we just sort of put it together. He sort of asked me because I had writing experience as well as like scripting experience. So I was able to put together my work into the game without him sort of having to be an intermediary.
Awesome. So we will now jump to the very last one, the big dog, so to speak. I'm sure none of you need me to tell you this, but we've got the very, very celebrated and wonderful Hollow Knight. So,
Has anyone heard of this one?
anyone know that? Anyone played that? Yeah? Interesting. I'm so shocked. But obviously, like, we pretty much all know how celebrated and popular Hollow Knight is. It's one of the most popular titles coming out of Australia, let alone South Australia. And as mentioned earlier, David, you were the technical director for the game. So if there's any cheeky behind-the-scenes stories, now would be the time. But the game actually has over 350,000 reviews, so I didn't go through all of them. Most of them are overwhelmingly positive, and approximately 35,000 of them were just various iterations of the joke, this game is full of bugs, which proves that gamers do love puns and we should all be forgiven for the horse ones earlier. So if we can just get any insight whatsoever, and yes, Silksong is coming. That's not what we're talking about. I know you all want to know. If we could get that.
Yes, the boys are hard work on Silksong. Well, where to begin? I mean, we can talk about how it started, but so Hollow Knight started as a Kickstarter campaign that came actually originally from a Game Jam game. The other two guys, William and Ari, who worked on it, these were good friends of mine. We'd known each other for a decade prior. And they thought, okay, we'll make this game in a game jam. They did an early version of this game they built. And they thought, all right, we'll run a Kickstarter. So I got involved just after the Kickstarter campaign had finished. Now, two guys had built a prototype in an engine called Stencil, I believe. So it was a very, very early rendition of the game. Same sort of sprites and stuff, but it was starting to buckle under the weight of what they were trying to do. And they had a vision to kind of do something a lot more interesting with it. And certainly after the Kickstarter, which was a wonderful success and a really, really good reception that they'd gotten for it, I started chatting to William and saying, hey, look, you want to move this into a game engine that's going to support you. And right at the time, Unity has really started to make a mark on the market. And certainly for me, you know, talking about your past about developing games and how difficult it was, for me, the barrier to entry was really the challenge. I'd come from a background working in IT. I came from a telco background. I used to make games for fun at home. And as soon as Unity came out, it was a game changer, ultimately, because it meant we don't have to write our own sound. We don't have to do all these things. So we said, look, hey, let's put it into Unity. I'll come join you guys. Let's get this thing done. So I had actually, just a few months prior, I'd lost my job because the company I worked for had sold. So my whole team got made redundant. I was out of work and I just started probation on a new job. So I got a very, very nice job. Person had put in a really good word for me. And then the guys said, hey, let's get started. Let's work on this full time. So I handed in my papers sheepishly and said, sorry, I'm not going to finish my probation. This game just looks too much like fun. Let's do it. Let's figure it out. And so that's what began the whole project.
So we don't have a huge amount of time, but one thing that I really want everybody to kind of have a consideration about, the game released in February 2017, which in my mind doesn't sound like that long ago, but that was 8 years ago at the end of this month, which is crazy. But it's safe to say that the game has not only endured the passage of time better than probably most of the games that you would say, but it is also consistently still regarded as one of the best platformers on the market. What factors do you think contribute to why Hollow Knight has stood the test of time so well?
I'd say more recently, it's been very difficult to tell because it's sort of gotten into a place of its own. The community really is who made it what it is. You know, I'm never ceases to amaze me to see the fan response to stuff. Even now, people writing videos about it, talking about what their takeaway was with the story. So certainly for us, the big thing was we wanted to make a game that we wanted to play, we wanted to enjoy. And we thought about things like, we love that there's secrets in games. We love uncovering stuff. We love picking out the wall and seeing if something will crumble, you know, what can we uncover? So I think early on, that's what sort of got it going. Because it had a very slow start. We didn't, you know, it wasn't fanfare. We struggled sometimes to show it to people. People weren't that interested to see it. And we thought, no, we'll, you know, try it out, play it. It's something cool. But eventually over time, I think people started sharing experiences. And to me, that is the reason I do this. That's the reason I still do it now, is I want to make stories and experiences that people can really enjoy. And so when they start telling each other, oh, this thing happened to me, can you believe it? And they go, well, that didn't happen on my playthrough. And they'll go, yeah, go over to this area, talk to that character. And if you do this thing will happen. And so I think that's what starts to give it that long legs. Yeah.
I think it's pretty funny. Like I played the demo at AvCon in 2016 or something, or maybe even 2015.
It was 2015.
Yeah. And I gave like negative feedback. I was like, I don't like the movement. You should change it. And you guys didn't, and everyone loves the movement. So I was wrong about that.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't listen to you on that one because that was my doing. Yeah, no, look, it was interesting. We had it modelled, and speaking to the movement, we had it modelled on certain games that we thought we would do sort of a Mega Man-ish kind of movement system. But it was, again, during development, there were these little gems that would pop out. So not everything was planned. There were just things by playtesting it that either we get a response or feedback, or we had a little idea. Some of the most popular things that came out were just a result of that. So again, it's really good. I'd say it's important to be pragmatic about your game and not be so set in stone that it's going to be this way. You never know what will pop out of there. So having the flexibility for it is...
And be okay with ignoring feedback.
Yes.
Yeah, obviously a wonderful game, and the folks at Team Cherry are very sweet. They're very nice folks. They're working extremely hard, and we all just need to leave them alone and let them cook. They will finish this game, but we just got to let them do it.
We do. It's coming. We can be patient. But yes, on the topic of legacy, because that is what Hollow Knight has. It has a legacy. I think it's fair to say off the back of this conversation that so too does South Australia in having produced so many really cool games of such different varieties as well. I mean, I don't think any of you probably walked into this lecture theatre expecting to hear horse and bogan and just all of these various words thrown at you in the space of 45 minutes. Correct me if I'm wrong, if that's exactly what you expected, but I would be very surprised. But it just goes to show very much how much talent is in South Australia and how much cool stuff has come out of here.
And if you come back here in another 5 years, we'll be talking about games that were out there today. So.
Absolutely. So that is the end of our panel now today. Please give a huge round of applause to our wonderful panelists for sharing their experience and expertise. To finish up, we do have a little video for Hollow Knight, and it'll get you in the spirit to go out and then play maybe some more games. So with that, we'll be finished. Thank you very much. And that was 8 years ago. So go out and check out the ones that are here for 2025. Thank you very much.